Hi, I'm Ross Tayler, your host and guide for Sacred Sundays, a space to slow down, tune in, and return to what's sacred within and around you. I'm also a life coach who supports empaths and sensitive souls, guiding them on the journey back to self-acceptance and inner alignment. My passion is connecting with like-minded souls, and these conversations are part of fulfilling my purpose and serve to deepen our collective exploration of what it means to live in connection with the sacred. Some weeks you'll hear a sound-based offering to open the space, other times we'll simply begin in conversation. However it unfolds, this is an invitation into presence, connection, and the beauty of the unseen. If you enjoy these conversations, please subscribe, rate, and share so others can find their way here. So pour a cup of tea, settle in, and let's begin.
Hello, my name is Kirsten Walter, and today I will be your guest host on the Sacred Sunday podcast. I'm delighted to share that we are going to flip the script today as I interview the host of this podcast, Ross Tayler. It is a real honor to introduce Ross to you on a deeper level, and with that being said, let me tell you a little bit more about your host and guide of this podcast. Ross Tayler is a guide for empaths and sensitive souls, blending the steadiness of an elder with the heart of a seasoned coach. As a lifelong student of the human experience, he is devoted to easing the inner weight that sensitive souls and empaths often carry. His mission is simple: to create safe space for the sensitive hearts to feel seen, supported, and more connected to who they truly are. Whether working with individuals or groups, the safe container Ross provides allows his clients to soften, share, and discover their truth. Having navigated sensitivity, anxiety, and deep emotional currents himself, he brings a rare blend of empathy and truth-telling to his work. Ross's own awakening began in 1999, and since then he has completed life coach training, facilitated thousands of hours of group work, and walked alongside people during some of their most transformative seasons. His trauma-informed lens is woven together with the spiritual insight of human design, which offers clarity and context for those who feel life intensely. With decades of leadership, community service, men's work, and healing center experience behind him, Ross brings a grounded, gentle presence to everyone he supports. His gift is helping people finally see themselves more clearly by untangling the unconscious patterns and inviting them home to a more rooted, accepting version of who they are. Welcome, Ross. Welcome to your podcast.
Thank you, Kirsten. It's such a unique experience to be able to have this conversation with you and to be highlighted in this way. So when you suggested the opportunity to flip the script, I was very happy about that and was a heck yes.
It's my pleasure to do this for you and with you.
For me as well.
So, Ross, after reading your bio, I shared with your listeners what you do, but I really want to get into the why you do what you do. Like, why do you get out of bed every day and do what you do?
That's a great question. I am so motivated by the change that I see my clients make. Often it feels kind of magical, but it's really motivated by my own journey. I think for so long I've been self-aware and trying to change my own outcomes and my own path.
Yeah.
And to be able to support others to do the same is just really aligned with my purpose. It's aligned with my values, and it just allows me to show up in a way with my natural gifts and see the change that people can make in their lives. And I've seen that in such extreme ways, like when I worked in treatment centers, working with people struggling with addiction, and seeing the transformation that can happen from the day they walk in the door to the day that they walk out 4 or 6 weeks later. Unbelievably empowering. And to have played a role in those things is really, really such a gift. And that's what keeps me getting up. It's that drive to be that guide, to be that support with people as they're making those changes for themselves. And ultimately, they're the ones who have to do the work. So I'm just walking alongside them. I'm not actually doing anything for them. That's what gets me up in the morning for sure.
Amazing. You know, I've known you for a long time. I think 18 years now. Did we come to the conclusion?
Something like that. Yeah.
And what I've known about you is that you have these defining moments in life. We
Mm.
all do. And so I want to talk about your defining moments in life, that what happened to set you on the path that you're now on.
Yeah, that's a great question as well. I guess the challenge with that question is choosing which one. I mean, I can go back all the way to being born premature and everything that came along with that. I can speak about being bullied. I can speak to not feeling like I really fit in anywhere, whether it was school. I started to shine when it came to time to work, when I could actually put my energy towards something and working. That was really great. And then that became my obsession. And that was where I was able to put that energy. But
Mhm.
back to your actual question, I think the turning point for me happened when I got divorced. When that happened, it was a real moment of like waking up. I was pretty numb and pretty asleep up until that point, and getting divorced woke me up to, okay, something's not right. Something is out of alignment. Something needs to change. And from that point on, there was like these other heroes' journeys that kept showing up, that kept guiding me along the path. And so any one of those heroes' journeys, and a lot of them were relational, a lot of them were personal, whether it was the work I was doing or finding myself in that work. But a lot of it was just all about waking me up to my own self and my purpose. And it happened over many years.
So when did you start the life coach training?
The life coach training was in 2006. And that came around in a really interesting way because at the time I was working for Starbucks. And in my role at Starbucks, I was what was referred to as manager, coach, mentor. I was trained to train managers.
Mhm.
And there was a book that was given to us during that time, and it was called Fierce Conversations. And it was all about communication and a very specific model for communication. And it just was so inspiring to the point where I shared that book with my team.
Mm.
And in the sharing of that book with my team, one of the shift supervisors said to me, "Hey, you would be a really good life coach as well." And I had no idea what she was talking about. I was like, "What are you talking about?" And I realized at that point that the author was a life coach, and that was the work that she was doing in the world. And that made me look into it. And very quickly, the right school showed up. And there was actually a woman in Squamish who, the very next day after I looked into this school, somehow we got talking about it. And I mentioned the school. She's like, "Yes, that's the school that I was going to go to. It's amazing." So it was like this instant confirmation. And I signed up, and the rest is history. And I loved being a part of that school and their way of teaching and their way of delivering what they deliver in the world. It was amazing.
And so this all started with a book about fierce communication.
Yeah.
I love doing things like this with you because then I learned something new about
Hmm.
you, and I just couldn't think of a more fitting name of title of a book
Hmm.
that would like open you up and speak to you, because that's what you do. You have
Totally.
fierce conversations, you have
Totally.
communication with people, and fierce not being, it could have a negative connotation, but as I know, and I think you feel the same way, but you can speak to it, is fierce can be loving and kind.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
It's about saying the unspoken. It's about saying the thing that feels risky. It's about speaking our truth no matter the cost. And it's interesting because I don't think that comes easy really for anybody. I mean, especially for me as a sensitive, like it feels very risky at times to be able to do that. And the funny thing about that book is that as I got into my journey creating my practice,
Mhm.
I set that book aside because I wanted to find my way. I didn't want it to be influencing, like I wanted to create my own path, if that makes sense. And it wasn't until years later that I picked it up because it's such a valuable format of communication skills and just these tangible pieces that you can work with, that I started to gently introduce it to clients. And I think it was actually at the treatment center that I brought it forward because there's so much about communication when you're healing, right? That
Mhm.
surfaces.
And did you find when you went through your training as a life coach that you got a lot out of it personally, because we tend to go into these programs because we want to be of service to others. But what ends up happening is we do our own work before then we can show up for others. And so, what did you really get out of that program and learn about yourself? Do you remember?
Oh, I guess the first thing was I didn't know what I had signed up for. I really didn't know. These courses were offered in a hotel, and I was sitting in the lobby of that hotel thinking, did I just sign up for another Amway kind of thing? Like, is this multi-level marketing? Like, what have I done? Like, is this going to be what I want it to be? And eventually it was time to go up, and it was in Vancouver in the West End, and it was on the top floor of the hotel. And I loved that space. It was a 300, well, maybe not 360 view, but you were looking out at English Bay and you could look over the West End. It was magical. And it was all windows. And when I walked into the room, it was about sitting in a circle. We all had to sit in a circle. So there was no classroom. It was sitting, taking your seat in the circle. And I'll never forget the feeling of like, these are my people. It was like the first time in my life that I felt that kind of energy of like, oh, I've arrived. And back to your original question, everything after that was about us actively coaching right out of the gate. The beginning, it was like, take that binder we gave you, put it under your chair. You're not going to need it. It was 100% experiential. And right away, we started coaching each other because we're all natural coaches. We all have this gift if we step towards it. So to your question, everything was about bringing your own things to the table to work through. And so it was all about self-exploration. And these courses took place over a 3-day weekend, once a month. And it doesn't feel like a lot of hours, but it was intense. And so the month in between was about integrating your experience, practicing, reaching out and having sample clients. And so the growth that happened through that experience was in some ways exponential and challenging because it surfaced things that, of course, hadn't looked at before.
Incredible. And did you, when you started working with clients, did you just work one-on-one or did you start doing group work right away?
I started with one-on-one. The group work came, I don't remember really when that started, but maybe at least maybe a year or two later, but I focused primarily on the one-on-one.
Yeah, your journey as a life coach, I really want to dive into this a little bit because you've unpacked a lot of things over the years. And like for me as well, you've unpacked a lot of things just by sharing your teachings. So some of the things that we've talked about are nervous system regulation. And let's just stop right there because this is huge. You have a philosophy around nervous system regulation that I think is brilliant. So why don't you share that?
Yeah. I think honestly, and this actually came late in my journey. It was probably 2019, 6 years ago when this surfaced in my awareness. And the moment I heard the teachings, and it was through a podcast while waiting at the ferry on the Sunshine Coast, actually, and listening to this podcast about the nervous system. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is it. Like, this is everything. And what I love about the nervous system, without going into any teachings right now, we all have the same nervous system. So to me, I see it as this like equalizing force within us that is the core of, I believe, everything that goes on in our communications, in our relationships, in our trying to navigate our past trauma. Our nervous system becomes tuned to those experiences, but the bonus is it can be retuned. We're not stuck with the tuning. And so when I look at all the different things, like even anxiety or the different things that we classify in the medical field as certain things, I believe that as these teachings around the nervous system start to expand into our everyday, because it is revolutionary, really, we're going to start to have a different perspective on some of the things that we've classified in certain ways. And we can actually just bring it back to, well, this is just a symptom of a dysregulated nervous system. And what can we do to help that nervous system regulate in order to bring balance back? So the example I love to use is if you think about a child showing up at school and is having behavioral issues, I believe some of that and not all of that, like I don't want to paint too big a brush across this, but I really do believe that if we had the perspective of, oh, what is it in this child's environment that is causing the child to show up with a dysregulated nervous system, you'd probably find out, oh, well, there was so much going on at home. And with the tuning that has happened in that child's nervous system, that's going to show up at school. And all of a sudden it's a problem because it becomes something in the classroom that has to be managed. And how do we solve that problem? But the problem goes far beyond the classroom. And so that's all nervous system stuff. And yeah, just the ripples of that are so far reaching. So a lot of the time when I'm talking to clients, it's very much about that piece.
Right. And I'm going to assume that when someone comes to work with you, that's the first piece that you're addressing is like that regulation, the safe space, that container, because nothing else can happen until that's established.
I wish I could say that that was true. I think trying to teach that to a dysregulated nervous system can be a little challenging. So I think it requires some time first. So I think the first piece is actually just holding a space of listening and connecting and creating safety and creating the relationship. And then we can start to talk about those things.
Right. Yeah. The trust needs to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. So then moving forward just a little bit, you've also brought human design into your work because you very much created your own path, just like you wanted to when you first saw that book on fierce communication. You put it away because you wanted to find your own path, and you have, and you've done it by learning a lot about healing and how to show up for people and how to help them untangle their unconscious patterns. And I believe the human design piece comes in here.
It does. And there's something you said that reminded me of something I wanted to say, and I'm going to say that first and then answer your question about human design, because it kind of is connected. When I got into this work of coaching, when I finished my training and wanted to bring it out into the world, I had 2 clients that signed up that were paying me at the time $50 a month. And I was working at Starbucks. I had stock options, all the benefits you could imagine. And I was like, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to change the world. And the 2 clients was the catalyst. And I did. I quit Starbucks and I went out into the world and shared this. And I wouldn't recommend that to anyone. Like, it wasn't easy. It became a hero's journey within the hero's journey. However, what it speaks to is how passionate I was about this work. So how this ties into the human design piece is that once we know ourselves and understand the map of who we are and understand our energy, I realized that human design is like this roadmap of not only the potential that we have within us, but it's also the roadmap of where we struggle and why. And so it brings out and kind of maps out all of these things that I've seen in clients over the years. And so when I discovered it for myself, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is such a powerful way to understand ourselves, because when we understand ourselves, then we can start to take action and we can start to address the unconscious pieces. Our conditioning, our struggles, like those are kind of mapped out as well in a genetic kind of way. And so immediately I saw this as an amazing tool to enter this work. It's like I saw it as a doorway, and it's a pretty dense system in terms of trying to understand it all. But for most of us, we don't need to understand it all. It's just the basics that are so powerful in shifting our everyday lives. But it explains things. Like there's things in our charts that explain why we might feel powerless at times, that explain why we might feel like we don't have self-worth. It explains why we can be overwhelmed by other people's emotions. And so I find it such a great tool to support clients to learn about themselves as they're doing this work of moving forward in their lives.
So very much like how we need to honor the seasons and the natural rhythms of life, you're saying we also need to honor our human design because that's got a rhythm.
Very much so, to the point that there's billions of possibilities of what a chart can look like. And what that says is that really none of us are here to be the same as each other. We're here to be our unique expression. And so those billions of variations create our uniqueness and our unique signature and the creativity that we're meant to bring out into the world.
Do you want to share with everyone your human design?
Sure. So my human design is that I am an energy type. And so what that means is that I have consistent access to a certain energy that is related to creativity and life force that I bring out into the world. And my way of being in the world is connected to having many things that I can bring that energy to. And so multiple balls in the air, like different projects, like different interests, different things that keep me going. And my path with that is to be in response to what's showing up rather than trying to make life happen. And the biggest piece, which is how to make decisions. So there's kind of three parts to it. There's the energy that you bring, there's the way that you engage the world, and then the third part is how do I make decisions? And the decisions come from the body, not the mind. So from the neck down instead of from the neck up.
Right.
Only 1% of the population makes decisions from the neck up, which is counter to the way that we're taught to make decisions. And so for me, that's from my emotional center. So what that means is I need to take time. At the very least, I need to sleep on things. And if it's a big decision, I need to wait for my emotional wave to kind of go through its cycles so that I can make a good decision. So the bigger the decision, the longer I have to wait. And those three things kind of form the pieces of what makes me use my energy in the world. And there's so many variations on that. So at the top level of the energy, there's 5 different types, and I'm one of those 5 types. But I'll leave it there. I don't want to go into a human design teaching.
Great. What I really get out of that is that for the most part, we're teaching people how to come into their bodies and tune in to make decisions, gain clarity, which is, part of the reason that people reach out to a coach is they're struggling with something. They're looking for that answer, and it's you as a guide to take them on a journey to find that answer within.
Exactly. Yeah. And human design is just one of the tools.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to share about any of the other tools that you use in your practice to help clients gain clarity?
It's funny. It's a hard question to answer because so much of what I do is, like I mentioned, my design, it's about responding.
Right.
So my toolbox is very much created in the moment. So it's like, I can't think of what to say as an answer to that question because it's so organic and it can change. And I have this like wealth of things that I can draw upon.
Yeah, well, it's called intuition, and you have great
Right.
intuition. So I've noticed that in how you even interview other guests on your podcast is you use a lot of your intuition. And I know that comes out when you're working with your clients as well.
It does because there's a connection that gets created and I'm tapping into their energy as much as my own
Exactly.
and working with what is needed rather than what is, the typical prescription of what should happen.
Right.
So it's very organic in that sense.
Yeah. There are a couple of other things that I want to talk about as well. The hero's journey,
Yes.
Finding Joe.
Mm-hmm.
You've introduced that film to a lot of people,
Mm-hmm.
me included. A powerful film. We don't need to talk about Finding Joe. People can find that on your website and find a link to watch that. Let's talk about the hero's journey, though. Is everyone on a hero's journey?
I believe we are. And the whole thesis of that movie is that we are all on a hero's journey and that there's 4 stages that we go through on that journey. And the first one is separation. This idea that, something happens and it's like a tap on the shoulder. And that tap on the shoulder is an invitation to break free from the path that you've been on. For example, when I got divorced, that was my tap on the shoulder. That was the first one anyway. And the moment that you say yes to that step, then you're stepping into the initiation. And the initiation it's the unknown. It's like, how am I going to navigate what it is that I need to learn? And that can look so many different ways, but usually it's an experience that you have within your everyday life and trying to overcome that. And it's about the initiation is very much about connecting back to yourself. And on the other side of that initiation is there's kind of like an awareness that comes from that. There's a transformation that happens. And so there's like a new beginning. I always use the example of the caterpillar to the butterfly. It's exactly the map of the hero's journey. And so on the other side of that initiation, there's a rebirth that can happen. And the caterpillar doesn't know it's going to become the butterfly. And then the next piece is kind of returning to your village, returning with your teachings and realizing how much you've changed, and everyone around you sees how much you've changed. And so that I came to quite organically. Like, I was actually living on Vancouver Island at that time and going through this epic hero's journey, and literally had this whisper in my ear of hero's journey. What is that? I didn't know. And it was at some point I got off the island and went to Vancouver, and somehow that movie Finding Joe came across my awareness. And I remember sitting in the Starbucks on the corner of Denman and Davie in the West End, listening to that word for word, because I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. Like, this is the map of what we're all going through on some level. And that's funny because I always think about other people and then I have to go through it, right? So it's like, I had to realize that as well. But it was the first thing that made me realize I actually can control my destiny. I can actually change the outcome of these things. And I'm actually being invited to wake up to those things. And the more that we ignore the tap on the shoulder, the more intense it gets, unfortunately. And being able to bring that framework to this work has been really amazing. And of course, we can all relate to that, right? Because we know what it's like to be in that uncertainty. The byproduct of that is all the anxiety that we feel, because uncertainty creates anxiety when we can't find that next action. And yet there's so much learning that comes from that.
Amazing. I believe that when you worked at healing centers, you saw many people on the hero's journey.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to share about your time working at healing centers and what that was like for you?
Wow. I mean, I think that the 8 years that I worked at healing centers and then also at a very traditional addiction center, that was my schooling. I mean, it was like I learned things there about people because I'm an observer and I really look at the patterns that people bring. But I don't think there's anything more humbling than having to face your addiction in that way. It's classic hero's journey because you have to leave your environment. You have to say yes to it. You come to this center, you leave your world behind, literally, and you have to step into and cross the threshold, which is the separation, and into the initiation. And then during their time there, we, as the team that was trying to help all of these people, got to witness that transformation. We got to see the caterpillar become the butterfly.
Exactly.
So, and everything in between that happens, and seeing the humanity and the struggle and the emotions, it's hard to really express it in any clear way. It's just, it's unbelievable. And I think at the addiction center was the most intense in terms of like seeing people come off the streets who were literally hunched over when they got there and really close to death, and to see them transform and how quickly they transform. Like, the body is so able to heal so quickly when given the nurture and support. And so that was unbelievable to see people get that spark back.
Yeah. It takes a really special person to work in a healing center. So I hope you realize like how special you are just for stepping into that work. And I know that you had a big impact on the people that you worked with. Just your presence,
Yeah.
being with
Yeah.
them
And
in those moments.
it is hard to, I mean, there was definitely a lot of feedback that came back. I continue to have people reach out to me from time to time. And it really, you don't realize the impact that you've made. And sometimes you get to hear it, sometimes you don't. It's also really hard work
Of
on
course.
all sorts of levels. You get to see people at their biggest emotions and holding space for them when they lose it, for lack of a better word. Like, and I'm not saying that from a judgmental place. It's just to be able to hold space for people when they're having these deep breakdowns, and to not judge them and to be compassionate and kind. I mean, one of the things, the biggest takeaways from that work was we don't have to do anything. Like, there was so much effort placed on like doing something for people or trying to fix something or trying to make their pain less. But the most powerful thing was just to sit with someone and not have an agenda, to just sit with them quietly and just like, hey, I'm here. It's okay. That was the most powerful thing. And I'm grateful for that, because I don't think I could have learned that any other way. And it allowed me to let go of trying so hard. Because, like a conversation I had earlier today, we can't actually do anything for anyone. And that's the thing of the hero's journey. It's like, we have to find the way ourselves. Like, we have to find our path. And so just being with someone seems like it's not enough, but it's actually so much, because it roots back into what's been missing in most of our lives in some way or another, that connection, that nurture, the care. It's exactly what we need, and it's enough.
And there's an aspect of vulnerability on your part that I feel you dance really well with, where you share a little bit about yourself to show the shared humanity piece, that
Mm,
I'm here and I'm holding space for you. And I do understand. You don't understand piece for piece their journey because you haven't walked in their shoes, but you
hmm
understand based on your own human experience how challenging and difficult it is, because we are all so much more similar than we are dissimilar. And I've noticed that with you, I've noticed that with myself whenever I've done work with people, is that the little bit that you can share with them to show them your humanness
hmm
is healing.
Yeah. And you're right. Like, we do have common threads. Like, there's extremes to the situations that people find themselves in, especially when it comes to addiction. And
Yes.
yet there's these threads of humanity that we all have in common. And that's actually one of the things in human design. There's these 6 core wounds that we all have. That's one of the interesting things, is listening to clients talk about their history. And it's like, oh, okay, there's the core wound of repression, or there's the core wound of shame. There's the core wound of guilt. It's genetically in there. So it's like, those are the things that we relate to with each other, because those are the places of common ground. Like, oh, I relate to being abandoned when I was a kid. I
Right.
relate to being rejected in relationships. And I mean, that's one of the things with working in treatment centers, was seeing all these people who come from different walks of life, who walking down the street would never encounter each other. And yet, to have them sitting around the table, it was like all of a sudden they've got this common language, common ground, common experience. And I joked at one point, because I realized that it wasn't necessarily the center that was creating everything. It was the connection amongst these people that was actually doing the healing. And I think it's Peter Levine actually says that. It's like, the moment that you're connecting with others and hearing their stories, that's what provides healing. And so we just provided a space for that to happen.
It's always about the people showing up.
Hmm
Make the centers what they are. It's the
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And this feels like a perfect segue into talking about group work, because you've done also a lot of men's work. And
hmm
there's just so much healing that comes in group work, just from the very aspect of knowing you're not alone. That the minute
hmm
people start sharing, and like you said, these people come from all different walks of life and may never interact with each other, and then show up in a group and start talking and realize they're so not alone in their struggles. That is healing. And anyways, I'd like you to share a little bit about men's work and how that's come into your life.
Yeah. So, well, I guess I want to speak to why groups are so powerful and why I love
Yeah.
facilitating them, because whether it's a men's group, a discussion circle, or something deeper, what you just said is actually the piece that is so powerful. The moment we sit in circle, and I think that's what I love so much about the course that I took, sitting in circle, there's no hierarchy. Everyone is equal. And when we have the space to share in a safe way, and we can speak to the things that we've gone through, everyone else becomes a witness to that. And everyone else gets to see themselves in that reflection. And I think one of the things that happens on this healing journey is we think we're the only ones that are having the experience we're having. And I can't tell you how many circles I've been in, mostly in the men's circles where this shows up succinctly. Inevitably, there's someone who shows up and says, you wouldn't believe this thing I'm going through. It's so intense. And they share all the details of it. And I will say, okay, wait a second. Like, you think you're the only one. But then I ask the question of the group. It's like, how many other men in this circle can relate to what was just shared? And every single man puts their hand up, myself included. And that man is like, what? Like, I literally thought I was the only one. And that example relates to men's group, but it relates to every group. And we get to see ourselves in a safe way without even having to say anything. And that's what becomes so powerful, because the change that can come from that. So the other layer of your question was about men's work, and how I got into that was I was on my hero's journey on Vancouver Island. And I love telling this story. I was literally just had a conflict in the relationship I was in and left the house, was driving down the streets in Duncan and looked up to the side of a building and saw a sign that said support for men. And I was like, what? I couldn't imagine that as a thing. And of course, didn't trust it. So I went to the library, went online, looked up this organization and realized it was real, and then promptly got back in the car and to the office and met the fellow that was working there, who is now a friend who I actually engaged in the Okanagan. And we have this interesting connection where we reconnected in different places. And ultimately, this man shared that there was a men's group happening in the Cowichan Valley. And it was actually a block and a half from where I was living. And anyway, the hero's journey intensified, and I ended up moving to Ladysmith for a while. And eventually I was like, okay, I need to go to this group. And I had never done it before. There was some fear around going and sitting with other men and having these kinds of conversations. And I didn't really know what to expect. And surprisingly, what happened was I had another layer of the same experience I had at my coaching school, because, once again, we're sitting in circle. And it's like, we're talking about these things. Men can talk about emotions. And it became this kind of parallel experience to my coach training. And I just loved it. And same thing. It was like, oh my gosh, I want to bring this out to the world. I'm going to, share this with as many men as I can. And I did that. I came back to Squamish eventually after my hero's journey. And that was my return. And started up a men's group as soon as I could. Now, the other thing that came along with that was that this men's group was affiliated with an organization called the Mankind Project. And they put on these new warrior training adventures, which are this modern day initiation. And so in April of 2014, after having gone back to the Squamish, I returned to the island to have this experience. And that was really the catalyst for the next layer of growth and the next phase on the journey, which, that experience woke up something in me that I can't even really put into words, but I was not the same person that walked into that experience.
Beautiful. Thank you. I remember that story too about you looking up and Duncan and seeing that sign. Yeah. Anyways, that's a great story. Thanks for sharing that with everyone. Yeah. And I think for anyone listening, whether you're into group work or working one-on-one with someone, I think the key piece that you said is being witnessed. That is, I do a lot of self-study and a lot of stuff at home to take care of myself. But it's only when I sit with a coach or a counselor, or I attend a group where that's witnessed, that then I really feel seen and heard on my journey. And that is key to moving forward.
And it's so it's so true. Something that's been interesting on my journey is that I know how I work. And it's not like I'm doing anything radical. But I think what I'm doing is that I'm not following a script. It's like I'm not following a prescription of what needs to happen or what it needs to look like. I'm just really being present with that person. And so the interesting piece is that as I've been doing my work, it's been hard to work with people who have a script. So it's been hard to find somebody that works like I do. And I have had some really great support over the years, because I needed that to your point, it's like just to be witnessed is so important because we can't see ourselves accurately. We just can't. We're like the picture in the frame, and we need to have that reflected back to us.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to have someone that's able to do that with you.
Yeah, I mean, we all have our blind spots, and you and I, we've talked a lot about shadow work before, and just, the shadow work, the way I explain it to people, it's those things that are sitting outside of our conscious awareness in the
Mm-hmm.
shadows that we're not aware of. And it takes another person to shine the light on those for us and
Mm-hmm.
guide us into integrating them back into ourselves. They're sort of lost parts of ourselves. Is there anything you want to add to that? Shadow work is an important aspect of coaching and counseling.
It is. And I wish there was a better way to say it other than shadow work, because shadow work doesn't really do it justice.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's light work. It's really
Yes.
about revealing our light.
Exactly.
However, the classic definition of shadow work is the things that we've suppressed, rejected, or denied. And so, like you said, it's like the things that are sort of behind us. And these are ways of being that have been removed from our wholeness, that we've removed from our wholeness. In other words, like, I can't be this way or I won't be loved. And so shadow work is about reclaiming those parts of us that are in the shadow, hidden, and bringing them back into our wholeness so that we can shine our full light instead of our partial light. And so, it's a very, very powerful way of working with ourselves. And it's a way of seeing the reflection of ourselves. And so this often shows up in relationship of like, we're pointing our fingers and saying, oh, this person is such a whatever. And really what we're pointing at is we're pointing at this part of ourselves that has been rejected by us.
Yeah.
And so shadow work is about reclaiming all those things. And it's not exactly like there's the black and white shadows of like, for whatever reason, like I teach laughter circles as well. For whatever reason, someone might not be with laughter, like they can't be with laughter. And so they've put that into the shadows. And so there's the black and white version of shadow work where it's like we react to laughter. It's like being at a restaurant and someone's laughing beside us and we get frustrated. We're like, why is that person laughing? But that's the part of ourselves that we can't be with. But then there's things that are much more nuanced, and they require some real support and digging and detective work to be able to understand what it is, to get to the point of like, oh, I have this behavior because I didn't get listened to when I was a child. And so those require some more digging. And so there's so much what I refer to as gold that can come from this work.
Agreed. And I love your reframe at the beginning that you said you don't love the word shadow work because it's really light work. I love that reframe.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's just talk about sensitive souls and empaths, because that's what your business is geared to at this time.
I guess what I want to say about that is, well, I think my journey with that is kind of funny because for the longest time, well, I guess the easiest way to frame it is that I had to just do what I needed to do to get through life. I didn't necessarily have like some of the things that I've identified in the frameworks and the things like anxiety. I didn't know what those things were. I just knew what I was experiencing and what I was feeling, and I knew I didn't want to feel that way. So I did whatever I could to make those feelings go away. And eventually I got to a point where I started to feel more aligned in the world, and I felt better in the world, and I felt that I belonged in the world. And I started to learn about empaths and highly sensitive people. I couldn't really identify as that. So for example, if I took an HSP test, I would score very low today. And yet, if I would have taken that same test as a teenager, I probably would have scored off the charts. And same thing with the empath piece. Like, but for me, it just became so normalized. So it wasn't until recently that I was like, these are the people that I want to work with because I was that person. And I somehow didn't fully connect to that. But that was my journey. After my men's weekend, I reached out to my dad and I started to become a detective in my life, trying to figure out what happened. And I asked my dad about my childhood. And the first thing he said was, Well, you were really sensitive. And it's really funny to hear that because it makes sense. The world was really loud. It was really hard for me to be in. And there was experiences I remember having where I think one of them was driving the Hope Princeton Highway and stopping where the slide was.
Mm.
I don't know how old I was, but I was definitely young enough that I was being picked up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I absolutely lost it because of what happened at that space.
Mm-hmm.
And I was terrified that it would happen in that moment, and terrified that it happened, and didn't really make anything of it until later, realizing like, oh wow, like that's the experience that I had in that situation. And that's what my dad meant when he said, oh, you were really sensitive. But he didn't fully say it from a place of judgment, but I could tell that it wasn't easy for my parents to have to deal with that.
Yes. And do you want to clarify for the listeners the difference between an empath and a highly sensitive person? Because there is a bit of a difference.
Yeah. So I think we're all empaths. Being an empath is very much about feeling the world around you. In other words, knowing how other people are feeling, knowing what the temperature of the room is emotionally. We can tune into those things. And I think that's our natural gifting as well. That's the other side of being an empath, is like once we come into alignment with what this means, it's like what's revealed is actually our gifts. Highly sensitive is really about an elevated sense of feeling the world. So it's like on a scale of 1 to 10, whereas I might be a 5, someone else might be an 11. And that's where really experience everything very loud, very intensely. And there's huge impact that comes from that. So it's hard to be in the world where there's fluorescent lights and so much noise. For those people that are managing those sensitivities, the world becomes a very difficult place to be. And having an awareness of that helps them to normalize that to some extent, and to manage that in ways that can turn the volume down and make the world not as difficult a place to be. But they tend to be really just more impacted by what's going on around them. And we live in a very, very noisy world if we realize it.
We sure do. I think it's amazing that you've taken your challenges, some of your challenges, and shone the light on it, and then are putting it out in the world so that you can share that with others and help. And I think that's what we all do. We've talked about this, we take our greatest challenges in life and we learn about it, we heal it, we grow with it, and then we share it. And that's all part of the journey.
It is. It is. And in hindsight, it's always really almost laughable to see it because it makes so much sense, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a shamanic practitioner who says it so well. It's like the poison that we had to endure, how we overcame that poison becomes the medicine that we bring out to the world. And that's really how it goes. And for me, it's the same. And that's the other thing that gets me out of bed in the morning, is that knowing that I have that medicine to share.
Yeah. And it's the same for everyone. There's been no mistake on which family you were born into or which person you married or which career you chose. There's been no mistake. That's all part of the learning and part of the.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to talk about that we haven't talked about?
There's nothing jumping out at the moment. I think we've covered a lot of ground.
We sure did. I hope it gives people a better understanding of your gifts, how you work with people, what you offer in the world.
I don't think I have anything to add. I just feel really grateful for the conversation, and I'm grateful that you took the time to flip the script and shine this light, because it's certainly something that I think I'm pretty humble in the way that I walk through the world, and in a world that wants to see who we are, as an empath and as someone who's sensitive. It's like I have a really hard time with aspects of that. Not because I don't believe in myself, but just because, like, even sitting down in front of the camera and doing a video, it's like it feels so unnatural because I'm so used to working with somebody. And so it's been hard to communicate what I do. And again, it's like, how do I communicate what I do authentically when I can't see it accurately? Like, it's kind of an interesting dilemma. And so to have this opportunity is really great.
Well, as a fellow empath and sensitive soul, I appreciate you as well, like putting
Mm,
yourself out there and taking the time
hmm
to share these things because you're right. We tend to not be as loud as others
hmm
at sharing our gifts.
Yeah.
And so I want to end this podcast the way you end all of the podcasts with your guests. And that is by asking the question, what is one simple way someone can connect with the sacred today?
Mm. I think the thing that for me has been the most beneficial and the most grounding is just get out in nature. Just get out in nature and have no agenda. Just show up for yourself, get out of the noise, be with the trees, walk on the earth, be with the elements. There's so much teaching that can come from those things in whatever way you need it, because it's another reflection. See the strength of the trees, see the peace in the trees, see the metaphor of the leaves falling down and fall. Like there's so much information that we can see. Like I remember walking in Squamish by the Mamquam River, and I like to do the same thing over again. Like I'll go to the same place over and over again. But part of that is to be able to see what changes over time. And in the case of the Mamquam River, it's like it would literally change course all the time. And I remember at one point it changed course to the extent that I couldn't walk where I used to like walking because it was now the river. And I wanted to move the river. And that in and of itself became this teaching of like, well, I can't move the river, so I just have to go with that flow. And so nature is always teaching us and connecting us back to the rhythm within ourselves in some way or another. So that would be my way to connect with the sacred. And hopefully everyone is lucky enough to be close to some form of nature. And I think that's why I moved back to the coast, because my form of nature is definitely the trees and the forest and the water, and the ocean here in Nanaimo is a bonus. And for some, it's living in the desert in the Okanagan. But being in the Okanagan was not my place. I was literally drying up. And so I've been quite happy to walk in the rain no matter what, and just embrace it, because that's why I chose to come back here. And it's been great.
No, and I love that. For those who don't know, there is a body of water between Ross and I, and we greet each other over the ocean with pictures of where we're sitting on our side of the ocean because we both go out and enjoy nature right in the ocean. I couldn't agree with you more.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the best ways to connect back with the sacred.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I just want to say thank you again for allowing me to flip the script and for allowing me to introduce you to the listeners so that they get to know you on a deeper level.
Thank you as well. Thank you for joining us on Sacred Sundays. I hope something in today's offering spoke to your spirit, stirred something true, or simply gave you a moment to breathe. If this conversation resonated, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, or share the podcast. It truly helps this work reach the people who are meant to find it. And if you'd like to explore more of my work or connect with me directly, you can visit rosstayler.com, and that is Taylor with ER.com. Until next time, may your day be slow and sacred.